There are tons of players and strategies that can be really difficult to deal with when you're playing Valorant. Whether it's someone always lurking to people spamming your site with utility, dealing with these problems can be easier than you think if you incorporate these tips to deal with the 10 players and strategies that you see in your ranked games. Now, the first type of player that we got to talk about is the W keyer, and this is the person that is always running it down. They're running it down mid, they're running it down on your lane, they're literally just pushing through smokes and psychopathing onto your site, and oftentimes these guys will kill you because they completely miss your timing, as in you are checking certain corners, you're holding certain angles, and because they're constantly W keying, they end up in a place that you would never expect them to be. So how do you deal with these W key type players? Well, the first thing that you need to understand is that passivity oftentimes beats aggression. These players are relying on you to just get mistimed by whipping out a piece of utility or try to make an aggressive peek or play yourself, but if you are being patient and you wait for these players, you could shut them down by simply understanding that they are going to be kind of just storming in very, very quickly. Being able to be passive, being able to just hold a corner or a cubby allows you to punish these players because you're not going to be caught off guard. You're going to be ready to react to these players. Now, another thing that you could do to shut down a W keyer is by joint holding, and generally just having two people holding positions is going to be really, really easy to shut down a player that is just psychopath, swinging through, not clearing every angle, because they're not playing to the fundamentals, and you can just easily shut them down that way. Or you could even use preemptive utility a lot of times. There's a ton of utility that will just set up a player that is going too fast, make them slow down, force them to slow down, and then their timing's all off, and they can't just get the better of you with a simple W key strategy. Now, speaking of W key, I'm going to need you to type www.skillcapped.com if you want to climb at the fastest rate that you've ever seen. We offer a money-back guarantee, so if you just don't climb, you don't pay at all, and that's a crazy deal that will help you get better. We have in-depth movement guides, character guides, and everything that you need to build top-tier aim. So if you really want to get better and you want to do it risk-free, check it out right now in the links down below. But the next type of player that we got to talk about is the shotgun Andes. The players that are just running around with the shotgun. They could be doing it on attack, or they could just be holding their sight around the corner with the judge, or they're always playing in smokes. Whatever the case may be, these players are really annoying because you challenge space with a Vandal or some other rifle and then just get completely demolished by this person that is just jumping around and seemingly ignoring all of the rules of attack shooter. Now, the first thing and the easiest thing to do is just play from effective ranges. If you're trying to clear an angle or push onto sight, clear one side and then hold the opposite side, like as far away as you possibly can when you're swinging out, so that the shotgun user doesn't just get to kill you for free, or, you know, it takes them one extra shot to kill you, which gives your teammates one extra moment to deal with the shotgun user, or at least trade. The worst case scenario is just running through and then 2, 3, 4 of you are dying to a judge, and oftentimes this is the mistake of everybody involved, and if you play further effective ranges, you're going to be just fine. In addition to that, generally fighting and trying to challenge areas on the map that have the longer sightlines where your gun has a strategic advantage, this is going to mean it's less likely for you to die to a lot of these corners and cubbies. And if you have ways to gather info or ways to clear out corners with utility, that could be fantastic ways to not fall victim to just someone crouching around the corner. I mean, if you have to, put them in a damn retake scenario. Literally find where they are, rotate to the other side. It's super simple and easy, but it could put that shotgun user in a situation where they're completely useless on the retake. Now, the number one tip though that I'll give you is to make sure that you're wall banging and spraying through spokes a ton. Being able to wall bang certain corners so that you can check and see there's a shotgun user there. Spraying through smoke so that if there's someone crouched with a freaking shorty, you're gonna punish them. So guns that can spray through smokes without tracers, like the Phantom, are going to be a little bit better than the Vandal up against people that are just abusing shotguns. But overall, you're just trying to gather information or punish people that are playing way too close. Now, the next type of player that can be really frustrating to deal with is the always lurking type of player. They're always waiting, they're always creeping behind, they're always going to cut off rotation. How do you deal with this kind of player? What are the ways to shut them down? Now, the first thing that you need to do is you need to be disciplined with your rotation. If you're just running, knife out, making all the noise in the world, if someone's just lurking and waiting for you to rotate, they're gonna kill you for free. So on hot zones or areas that you think that they could be occupying, whether that's mid or whether that's around any corner on your way to rotate to the site on defense, you need to clear those disciplined. You need to have your gun out, you need to cut noise, and if they don't know where you are, then sometimes you could even get the better on them because they are thinking that maybe you already passed by, then they give up their position and you can make a play on them. Now, also, you got to make sure to always keep the lurker in the back of your mind and recognize the gaps that you have created, you and your team, in information. Like, if there was a pretty long moment where no one was holding mid, then the lurker could have lurked up anywhere in that space, and you need to keep that in mind. Think about spaces on the map that you know are clear as like solid green color, but the less and less likely that they are clear, they should be turning red in your mind, from yellow to red. It's like, warning, I need to kind of clear this. Red, I need to completely hard clear this because there's a good chance that someone could be here. This will mean that you're never going to allow this lurker to just set up in a really good spot and then potentially just walk right into them, or even worse, multiple people walk into them and then they all die because they expect the space to be clear. Now, the last way to deal with the lurker problem is probably the hardest one, and it's be patient. Oftentimes, a lurker is on a certain amount of pressure to do something. Like, you can't just spend the whole game lurking and not getting a kill, not being impactful. So if you can afford it, be really, really patient. Make it so that the clock is putting a lot of pressure on them to make a play. And if you set up in a position and wait and you're patient, oftentimes the lurker will fall victim to you. So it's like this game where you got to figure out exactly how to wait the lurker out enough so that they are pressured to do something. And as long as you're more patient than the other guy, you'll often get the better of him. Now, let's talk about Perma Snipers, because these type of players can be so frustrating to deal with, where you know every time they have money for it, they're going to buy an operator, or maybe they're even marshaling or outlawing or whatever. And it's really annoying dying to these because you feel like they're just stacking economy against you again and again and again. And first off, you're going to need to try to predict snipes. I think anytime that an opponent could buy a snipe realistically, you should be playing around it in some regard, just in case. You don't want to allow them to get a free round the first round that they buy snipes. Next off, you have to commit to jump and jiggle peaks, making sure that you're either gathering information with the map or with the force of their shot. Doing this allows you to gather information about where the sniper is, and oftentimes just rotate off. Like, I know a lot of people want to like jiggle a corner, force a sniper shot, and then they want to push that person. It's really easy for the sniper to re-peek an angle and potentially still get a kill, especially if they're Jett. They can re-peek the angle, get a kill as you're pushing up, and then dash away, smoke themselves off. And I think more than that, more consistent than that, is just to rotate off the point, make that opper play retake. That's the worst case scenario for the opper. So this is something that I think a lot of people need to do more. So gathering info about where the opper is could be enough to just be like, hey, we're just leaving here, and we put them in a retake situation, then we've already won. On top of that, there are going to be certain sites that are easier to hit on attack to basically punish the operators. So like if you're fighting from a really long distance when they have op, it's going to be really hard to get that trade-off. But if you're fighting a close effective range, it's going to be really easy to, even if you lose somebody, you're going to be able to push up and potentially trade with the op, or at the very least, they're not even going to be there in the first place because they don't want to play those positions. And that is just really important. So being able to predict and then play the sites or attack the sites that are not as good for sniping, that's going to be a really great thing. Now, the next type is not a player, but a strategy, and it's coordinated executes. This is a really difficult one to deal with on defense, where you're playing on site, you're chilling, and then a sky flash, a stun comes out, a Jett dash, and you're just freaking dead. You're like, what the hell? How was I supposed to play that better? I just got freaking flashed and stunned and dashed on and murdered. Like, what do I do here? But there is ways to deal with this. So there's a couple of different things you could do. Number one is meet them first. And this means that instead of just sitting back on the back of site, you know, I don't even know, A on freaking Haven, right? On defense, you're just sitting there back of site. You're allowing the opponent to set up exactly what they want, right? Sometimes you need to, at the very least, threaten a close position just a little bit. This doesn't mean you just keep fighting, you know, in short. Doesn't mean you fight long, but you put a little bit of pressure there, and you make it so if they want to clear the close areas, they feel incentivized to use utility because they don't know if you're there or not. If you just give them all that space for free, then it makes it so they get to save all their utility until they get to dump the execute on site, and that's not what you want. You want them to have to use flashes to take some of the closer angles so that they have less of this utility for when they actually push onto site. And what you're going to do here is you're going to give up space slowly. So you're going to fight a little bit, then back off. Fight a little bit, and then back off. You're not necessarily taking full duels, but you're applying pressure. You're using some utility yourself, making it so if they want to take those spaces, they have to invest. And that's a really, really good thing. Less investment for you when you're on point. So basically, you're creating these execute conditions yourself by just AFKing and waiting. And by being overly just do nothing, you're allowing the opponents to take all the areas and space they want and then be like, okay, there's definitely a guy on site. Let's dump him with 3 pieces of utility and just destroy him. And that's what they do, and there's nothing you could do about it. So another thing you could do is set up some type of stall or disrupt ahead of time. This could be a flash yourself. This could be gathering information yourself, some type of delay, whatever it is, some form of utility that creates a disrupt in the coordination and makes it so they're not going to get to completely, fully set it up on you. Maybe this means breaking apart their rush, or maybe this means counter ulting them or whatever. You're just trying to create a certain amount of disruption. And then the last one is just play retake. I know that giving them space is bad, but if you're not going to get like 2 people on site, I mean, even just trading for 1 person and dying is typically not worth it. It's better for you to save your utility and make them use all their utility to take site, and then you just retake with your team with your utility. So understand that sometimes just retaking is best, especially if the opponent is overusing utility on the take. Like if they're using 3, 4, 5 pieces of utility, it's fine to just play retake because you're going to have a huge ability advantage coming into the retake. So definitely keep those things in mind. The next up, we do got to talk about hard defense. And this is typically the turtle teams that they don't do anything. They sit back behind their utility, behind their cypher, trips, behind their one-ways, behind whatever. And they're just very, very hard to break through or do anything to, right? And one of the things I would say is break the utility slowly and put effort into breaking utility. Like if a cypher is just sitting there with a trip and just waiting forever, using utility to break his utility, even if you're not going to commit there, creates a lot of space on the map because it leaves the opponents guessing. Are they going to actually push that site? Are they rotating off? What are they doing? I know that that place isn't as secure anymore. So use time, effort, and utility to break up these pieces of utility, whether that's a turret, whether that's a trip, whatever it is. Work through the utility, work through the sage wall, work through the sage slows. Even if you're not going to commit, even if you're going to completely rotate off, it's a good idea to break through and whittle down some of this utility so you can't have these situations where everyone is stacking the other site, relying on the cypher to solo hold. Don't allow them to do that and spend the resources to actually break that stuff down. Now, another thing that you can do is force execute past it. It's similar to what we talked about, where you're going to commit a lot of resources into taking a site, which is, a dash, double satchel, a flash, another piece of utility. You're really committing a lot here, and you're force executing past it. The problem with this is I wouldn't try to force this unless you know your team's going to do it. You have some form of communication, because if everyone's not on board, it's going to fail miserably, and someone's going to get, trapped or tripped and killed, and it's going to be a nightmare. The other thing that you need to do to break up these hard defenses is take multiple angles. Fight for space. You see this all the time on Split, where everyone will just push B. They won't fight for mid. They won't fight for A. They'll just rush through B, and it often fails. Like, it just completely fails. Like, one piece of utility can completely mess that up. You need to fight for more than just one position. Oftentimes, this means putting pressure at other places, and it also means maybe fighting for mid, challenging heaven, taking heaven control. I'm not saying that you can't sometimes 5-man rush a certain point, but oftentimes this is only working because the opponents are not responding properly with utility. Like, there's just too many ways to shut down challenging from one direction, from one area. Just a single molly, a single trip, a single freaking piece of utility, and you're all done. So super important, fight for multiple areas, make people at least respect multiple areas on the map before you commit to one. But let's talk about the next type of team, and it's the default. And this is the type of team that will just default. They won't do anything on attack. You're playing defense, you're just chilling there, and you're peeking, you're looking, you're trying to find enemies. Where are they going? What are they doing? And they're just sitting default. They're all just spread out, waiting trying to take duels. And oftentimes they will get a pick here or there. Maybe they have a sniper, whatever the case may be. And if they get a pick somewhere, then they'll push. And the trick to beating a default, as weird as it is just to be patient. Because there is a cost to defaulting. And the cost is the time. It makes it so they haven't worked through utility. It makes it so the clock is ticking. So the less you do in this regard, the better it is for you, because eventually the opponents can't default anymore. They have to make a play, but now they have 30 seconds on the clock and they didn't bait through any utility. They didn't stop any molly. They didn't stop any slow. So they're going to rush a site and they're just going to get completely slowed down, stalled, and killed because someone has to plant. The clock is ticking. So if you're aggressive into someone that is playing passive, remember, the aggressivity into passive play, the passive person has the advantage. So if you push out, try to make something happen on defense, you're playing into their hands, and then when you die, they get to take the site for free and they're not punished. But if you're passive and you wait, then passivity, both sides are passive, that favors the defender, not the attacker. So it's super important to be patient, put them in these awkward situations, punish them with the clock, and if you have to, use some silent jump spotting, you know, some jiggle peeking, some crouch jumping and then uncrouch so you're not making any noise, gathering information, not challenging anybody, but figuring out where enemies are going so you're not caught off guard. But be ready to start dumping utility on them when they finally make a move at the end. And if you gather any information in like the last 40 seconds, realize that it's very likely that they're going to be committing to a site very, very soon. So if you use some preemptive utility, stall them out, stall that clock out, it puts even more pressure on them. Next up, we do got to talk about a type of player, which are just the wall bangers. And these are players that will spray a lot. They'll spray through boxes, they'll spray through smokes, they'll spray everywhere. Like bullets are flying non-stop. And it's super important that when you go up against a player like this, you're not pushing through any smokes because you're probably going to get smoked yourself. And you're playing stronger positions that don't rely on an opponent not shooting through a box. Like having a cover that is something that's wall bangable is a weaker form of position than having like a hard wall that can't be broken through. So it's a really good idea to make sure that you're playing stronger positions. You're careful about moving through areas that have places where you could get sprayed through, and you're also making sure that you're overly cautious about anything that is going to gather information about you. Darts and things like that. Sovas are going to just destroy you with their freaking Ares or whatever they're using, their Odin. So be really, really careful about that. Be quick to respond, and keep in mind that you're less safe around certain pieces of cover because you can be shot through the wall, and you probably will be. Now, the next type of player we do got to talk about is runners and gunners, and it's similar to the shotgun players, a little bit different, but some of the tips are the same, where you're taking these far effective ranges, you're making sure that you have time to react to these players that are sacrificing their lethality for extra amounts of survivability, right? They're running. It means that they're not going to kill you quite as fast as hitting you in the head, but they're a lot harder to kill. So you need to take your time with your shot, and oftentimes you're not gonna beat a run and gunner with a vandal or anything like that by taking no damage. Like, you're gonna take some damage, but the goal here is to line up that headshot. So you're really trying to go for a critical. You're trying to take your time and make your shot count. Oftentimes when they're running and gunning, it's a predictable pattern, so you're really trying to flick, hit the head, be very, very disciplined with your movement. You're not really trying to move yourself or make yourself more survivable because you're probably going to lose on that fight, especially if they have a gun that's better for running and gunning. Like, you're going to trade damage with them. So you're not going to win this fight by hitting body shots or running and gunning yourself. You're going to win it by being really disciplined with your movement, maybe not even moving at all, going for a crit, and you're going to take damage, yes, but at least you're going to be able to finish them off before they kill you. Another thing that you could do to deal with run and gunners is just generally play together. A lot of times run and gunners don't have the ability to take on multiple targets all at once unless you fight them from a very close range. So as long as you don't do that, I think you'll be just fine. Now, the last type of player is probably the most frustrating type of player because you sometimes just got to stop and wonder, maybe these people are just good. Maybe they're just freaking good, and every time I fight them, I'm losing. So the number one thing is don't ego 24/7, especially if the player is good. Set up an engagement that is favored for you. Set up an engagement that uses utility. Set up an engagement that uses your teammates. Play more fundamental gameplay. Just because an opponent is feeling hot that day, they freaking warmed up on their aim labs, they're on freaking 400 milligrams of caffeine, that doesn't mean you have to 1v1 them in the hallway with the Vandal. Like, you don't have to do that. If you want to win, and your goal should be to win, you should try to set up every advantage that you can to deal with this player. And it doesn't matter how good they're playing in this game. beat them on the fundamentals of the game, and then you can move past that, still practice your mechanics, become better and better. But today, when they're just kind of heating up, put a damper on that and don't give them the type of duels that they want to take all the time.